exactly what we're looking for. Everybody's bumbling around and putting together some pretty incredible pieces, but that's because it's all curated. So somebody's got to curate these happy accidents, and that's where artists come in. It's not directable yet. And the people who are developing AI, I'm talking to several groups right now, because it's engineers just working in the dark. They don't really know what animation and or live action and or visual effects and or anybody, even video goes, actually needs to make what we make. There are pain points in all of these buckets and all these industries that would really help streamline all of our processes and pipelines if we had AI engaged. But the stuff that I need AI to do is not sexy, so we're not getting the money to do that. But in the future, I think it's content is still king today. And I think what we're going to be looking at here in the next 10 to 20 years is we're going to be looking at a gig economy for creators, where you won't be looking at Amazon anymore. You're not subscribing to Amazon. You're not subscribing to HBO. You're not subscribing to Netflix. You're going to subscribe to Mark Andrews, and you're going to subscribe to Christina Wun, and you're going to subscribe to Fortunato and any other of your artists, and give them 99 cents a month to see whatever they come up with. And that's going to be because I'm going to be utilizing AI and have a team and a crew so that I can keep pumping out stories and characters and whatnot that I want to do without having to go through the big corporate studio machines that are basically tying my hands and trying to get to the biggest common denominator versus true fans. So we're looking at a future of where fandom goes rampant, and everybody, it's going to be a niche industry here in just a few short years. And AI is going to help supercharge that, supercharge what I can do, supercharge what everybody can do. So I'm very positive at it. You don't have to poop your pants just yet. I'll let you know, and I'll tell you when to poop your pants.
I mean, one thing, if I can add to that, I would
absolutely.
I am using AI a lot. I'm using it in the way I teach certain things to my students. And like Mark says, a lot of it is not perfect, but I always find something that's going to facilitate what I used to do. So if I can give any advice to anyone when it comes to AI, is embrace it. Don't run away from it. Don't stick your head in the sand. Just embrace it and learn whatever you can from it, and use whatever you can. Because sometimes I'll take a tool, I'll be using a tool, and I'll say, okay, this does not do what I need it to do 100%, but it certainly saved me a lot of time to do a certain part of what I had to do. So I look at everything that people offer me, and I see what part of this can I use to free up some time. So embrace it. Run towards it. Don't run away from it.
Yeah. Christina, you got any
I
comments?
mean, yeah, I totally agree. I think at the end of the day, companies are more and more interested in how AI can benefit them. And so the best ways as creatives that we can, use that to our benefit is to like deeply understand how to use AI as a tool to amplify your own creativity. Because it isn't going away. So to Fortunato's point, it's like the best way to be successful in this world is to embrace it and run towards it, and let it work for you versus, you working for it.
I wonder, are there limitations that you're facing in terms of using AI in your studios? We had a really interesting conversation at the top of our industry think tank yesterday about, breaking the dread, and this goes along with it. And I think this group has done a very good job of breaking the dread about AI. But for some people, or for some studios, I believe their hands are tied, right? Like they don't want to incorporate AI imagery necessarily because who knows where that actually came from, right? Have you experienced any of that kind of resistance at your studios?
Well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Just quickly at Riot, we absolutely cannot use it for like player or customer facing work. So it will never be a situation for us where we'll maybe create an image in AI and we're just going to slap it into our game. But we do use it as like a, trying out different ideas or researching quickly. So yeah, that's kind of how we do it. And so there isn't too much of a fear of like, something that's been unethically done getting into the game because we just like would never go from point A to B exactly like that.
Got it. And I do want to give Valeria a chance too, because I know she unmuted earlier to ask a question as well.
Oh, no. It's totally okay. No worries. My question was already answered. So
Oh, it was. Okay. Fortunato, did you have something to add to that as well?
We're very careful with how we use it, you know. If it's a tool that facilitates something, then we're going to use it. If it's got to do with imagery, you know, we know what we can get away with and what we cannot get away with. So we're very, very careful with, you know, with what we're doing.
All right. Just calling through the chat for.
Oh yeah, I saw one. There was one back here. Hold on. Can everybody speak again? We got that one. Oh, hello. I love to know what skills Mark and anyone else had to learn prior to becoming a director for animation and leading creatively. Skills. Well, I think the skills kind of come. You know, nobody is out there teaching you how to be a director, really, you know, unless you're in live action film school. And even that is kind of subjective of what, those folks are learning in school. I mean, I was asked to be a director. I never wanted to be a director. That wasn't even on my radar because I was having so much fun storyboarding. And storyboarding is kind of directing, editing, animating, character design, layout. I mean, I felt it encompassed a lot of stuff, and it's just filmmaking. But I would have to say I learned from my mentors. I learned under the directors that I had. And I had some crappy directors that I didn't think know what they were doing and were fumbling around. I had some really good ones. Brad Bird, not too shabby. Sam Raimi, not too shabby. John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, not too shabby. So that's where I learned the most about how to direct and how to lead. Being a head of story, being a department head on several pictures, that really taught me how to lead, how to protect my crew. You know, and that's two sides of your brain that you're using. You have your creative side, and then you have that organizational leadership side. I got to protect my crew. I got to keep them happy. I got to keep them motivated and inspired, right? They've got to know that they count, you know. So there's a really, I'm an in the trenches person. I think that works too. So they see me boarding and they know, well, we got to keep up with the boss. But you just kind of learn a lot of that stuff is learning on the job. As far as art skills go, you just have to do it to learn it. And you have to do it a lot. You got to eat, breathe, sleep, poop it all the time and expand. Like Fortunato was saying, you've got to embrace the things that are scary, right? I tell students all the time, it's like, look, you know what your strengths are and you know what your weaknesses are. The only thing you should be working on is your weaknesses, right? Because that's where you're going to grow the most. The things that you can't do. I can't draw hands. Learn how to draw hands. Just embrace the terror and just do what you're scared of doing. That's my short answer.
Love that. And Christina, I know you answered in the comments about the skill you really had to hone in terms of directing specifically is the ability to communicate your vision clearly. Could you like talk more about that? Like, how did you build upon that skill?
Yeah, not easily, because as like a artist or an individual contributor, you're so used to just, making art. And as you become a director or you're trying to lead people, it becomes more and more important to like communicate what the vision for that art is, like through your words or through slide decks or maybe reference gathering or whatever. And it was hard to learn that because it's just like not something that's natural. You have to practice. And so I would say like the first couple of projects where I was like in more so of that position, I can like think back to it and know that I wasn't very clear, and you'll be able to see that because everyone's kind of like making something a little bit different from what you had envisioned, and you're like trying to think about like why isn't it really moving in the direction that I'm looking for. And so, yeah, it took me a while to realize like oftentimes I'm going to have to continue to repeat myself because not everyone's going to absorb it right away, or always ask a lot of questions and make sure that people do have the same understanding, because words, for example, all can mean something a little bit different to different people. You can't just assume that everyone has the same understanding that you do. And repeating yourself all the time can feel weird because you don't want to, it feels like you're assuming people don't remember, and you don't want it to feel bad. But the reality is like you have to repeat yourself. So just like little things like that, you just realize are like things you have to feel comfortable with as well as like get good at. So yeah, it was mostly just through like practice and experience how I picked that up.
Fantastic. And Fortunato, I know Mark had talked about leaning on mentors, and I know you are a mentor to many. Anything to add there as well?
For me, I mean, one of the things that that I want to say is know what it is that you're passionate about. Let's start with that, because sometimes you may be in a certain part of the world where things aren't offered to you like in other parts of the world. So when I started out, I knew I wanted to work in film. That's what I knew. I wanted to do either television or film work. And so I went towards that because I was passionate about that. So be prepared to travel, be prepared to relocate. VFX is a global industry. And so, and there's a lot of positive aspects to that. And then secondly, I think this is piggybacking a little on what Christina was saying, surround yourself by the very best and don't be afraid. So I remember one person telling me once, with my first job, the third week at my first job, I had Tim Burton sitting next to me. And I said, and the first thing I said was I'm so scared. And somebody said to me, if you weren't, it wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah.
And so, it's that fear that you feel at the beginning. The scarier it is, it means that the more valuable it is. Because if it's not scary, then what's the point? That means that I already know how to do this. So surround yourself by the very best. Always be the small fish in the big pond. Don't ever want to be the big fish in the small pond, but know what it is that you're passionate about and start going towards that. Because the route, getting there may not be as linear as you think it is, but when you know what it is you want to do, you will get there. So.
Yeah, I don't think
couldn't agree
that's
with you
great.
more.
I don't think anybody can predict the path that they're on or how they got here, because the path is never straight. The path is corkscrew and goes all over the place.
Totally.
Yeah.
God, if I tell you how I started,
Well, that goes into
Actually,
this other question
from
that I
Lori,
found.
right?
Yeah, from
Yes.
Lori Lee.
She
Yeah.
asks, what was a moment during your career that makes you cringe? Something you or someone else did or said, but you're thankful/grateful it happened as a moment of learning. Ooh,
I had
gotta be brave for this one.
when I was so Brad, I worked with Brad on Iron Giant. And then I went to work with Sam Raimi on Spider-Man, because my head of story on Iron Giant was the head of story on the first Spider-Man movie. And so he called me up. I went over and worked with him. And then I had already set up that I was going to go up and be head of story on Incredibles when Spider-Man was over. So I finally get up to Pixar, move my family up, and we're working on Incredibles. And this is Pixar. Pixar, wow. I don't give a rat's butt who I work for, right? The studio does not wow me. It's the project and the people, number one, right? So I'm with Brad again. So everything's cool, and I'm meeting all these cool new artists, and everything's going great. And so we have a production manager, Catherine Zarafian. And so we have one of our this is like in our first opening weeks. So we have a big pitch, and Brad pitches a scene, and da-da-da-da-da. And he goes off, and Catherine Zarafian, the production manager, that's pretty high up for people who know, right? The production manager, she turns to me and she says, so when do you expect this board to be done? And I say, you're going to get it when you get it, and walked up and left the room. Ooh. So that's a big no-no to talk back like that. So now that I think about it, that's very cringeworthy, that arrogance that I have, and still have sometimes, but had back then. But it's it's that kind of opened up the fallout from that really opened up what the business side of the industry is versus the creative side of the industry. And you're on the clock, people. And that's what she was asking, because they had quotas to meet to think that to get to the end. And as I was coming up through the industry, my thing is creativity can't happen just from 9 to 5. It's happening all the time, right? And to me, the only milestone that I care about is the release date, because anything can happen in between when you start and the release date, and you have to be done by a certain time. So the deadline is the reason why they call it a deadline. So that's what I'm always working to. So that kind of just goes to my antagonism towards the production side of things. Later on, she was my producer on BRIC. And the first meeting we had was, I walked in and said, I don't like you, you don't like me, but I'll tell you this right now, I'm only going to speak the truth, and I expect only the truth out of you, or we'll be fine. And we did, and everything was good. But very embarrassing, my very young upstart that I was way back when.
Great and super relatable story, Mark.
Yeah.
Christina, any cringeworthy moments you want to recall from your
I mean,
career?
I honestly, ever since that question was written, I was like trying to think about like what's a good cringy moment that I can share that I like was glad that happened. And I maybe I just like blocked it all from my memory from the trauma of it because I can't think of a good cringy moment to talk about. And I like genuinely wouldn't mind talking about it. So I'm sorry I don't have anything to share. Maybe Fortunato does.
I don't really have anything cringy, but I do want to share something, because if I could even put, the first 20 years of my career, like, like in a bottle, and share something with you that sort of like, it's not really cringy, but I wish I knew this sooner than later. And it's when I started out in this business, I used to take a lot of things personally, and sometimes my response to certain notes were a little cringy. When I think about it now, when I think back and I think, my God, like, what a, like, why did you say these things? Because I was just basically taking things personally, and I had to learn, and it took me years and years and years to learn that it's not personal. It's about the final product. And I wish I knew that earlier on in my career. And so one piece of advice that I always give a lot of young people starting out is, don't take anything personally, and just learn to love the process. Because had I learned to love the process and not be so fixated on the final product, sure, like Mark said, there's always a drop dead deadline. I always had a drop dead deadline. I always knew that the film has a release date and I have to be done by that point. But if I wasn't so fixated on, I just want to be done, I just want to be done, I just want to be done, I just want them to like this, I would have had a much happier time in the beginning of my career. So there was a lot of cringe moments that I can't really define, but I'm sure there was many times that my response to certain things was cringy, because I was either taking things personally and I wasn't really enjoying the process. I just was so fixated on the final product.
I love that. And that's the perfect answer to Nicole's question too, about like, what is something you wish that you knew when you were first starting out in your careers? And that is so valuable. Christina or Mark, do you want to voice over anything that you, or expand upon anything that you answered there in the chat?
Yeah. I gotta look and see what I say. Yeah, to me, that question brought up the idea that nothing is permanent, that it could all go away, right? The job could go away. I've worked on projects that got yanked out of my hands, or you couldn't find funding, or never aired, or you're going, what the hell's the point then? But it's to me is, I don't get up out of bed to see something made. I get up out of bed to solve the creative problem that I'm going to be confronted with today, right? That's why you guys get paid, right? We get paid regardless of whether it's going to air or not, or be finished or not. We get paid to solve the creative problems. And I think that just goes back to what Fortunato was saying, is learn to love the process. That's the process. And nothing's permanent. You know, not everybody's going to have an 18-year career at Pixar. I was bouncing around between that, and that was normal. I worked a year or two at a time, or even months at a time, you know, and if freelance, you're 8 weeks at a time if you're doing boards, you know, per board. So it's a feast or famine industry, right? And now all the big studios are quaking in their boots because Flow won an Academy Award and they'd spent $4.6 million on it, you know, and I know everybody's going, why are we spending 200, right? So crap's going to change, people, and I think that's a good thing because it makes everybody honest in the companies and these corporations. But that means that there's going to be a lot more fluidity happening, right? And a lot more, a little bit Wild West. And I think that's actually going to be a good thing for the industry because that's where we really see the biggest amount of growth, right? In kind of creative endeavors and storytelling and the types of stories and stuff. Nothing's permanent.
Love that. Christina?
Yeah, to that question of just like what do I wish I knew when I first started? What I wrote in the chat was that it's okay to ask questions and actually you should ask questions. When I first started, I thought that because I got hired, like I'm like, oh crap, like they think I know everything and I have to act like I do know everything. And so if I didn't know how to make a certain thing or like there was something in Unreal I didn't know how to do, I would just like stay at my desk and try to figure it out. And especially back then when I first started, there was no like YouTube tutorials, there's no tutorials online. So there's no way to like learn it from other people. And it was pretty agonizing because like it just like isn't great to feel so unsure of yourself. And feel like you have to hide that, but B, it like takes so long to figure it out. But now that I'm on the other side of that, when I hire people who are just starting like junior level artists, my expectation is that they don't know, and I know that I'm going to need to make sure that I or their lead or someone has some time to guide, coach, mentor them and teach them. Like it's expected. And so actually when that new or junior artist like sits at their desk and doesn't ask questions, like that is more problematic than not. And it's actually quite impressive when a new artist feels confident and comfortable enough to like proactively ask questions. To me, it demonstrates like initiative, proactivity. They want to learn, they're excited to learn, and then they learn a lot faster because they get all their answers or their questions answered faster. So that's the thing I wish I knew when I started.
I had an open door policy as a director. Anybody could come to me at any time with whatever. Because most of the time directors have a closed door policy. They don't want to be bothered. They're busy. But this is something that I learned when I was coming up. I'd always bug the experts, right? When I was on Spider-Man, I would go over to the art department and hit up the production designer and just see what everybody was doing, right? When I was like, had a mental block or whatnot, or I just had to go see what the new Goblin design was or what the new Goblin bomblets were going to be. I'd walk over there and bug everybody there. I'd go on stage when they were working. I'd bug the DP. I'd go bug the special effects guys. I'd bug everybody just to understand what their roles were, what they were doing, and also to kind of get inspired. I did that all through my animation career too. Especially I bugged the people who are higher ranked than me, right? Who were the supervisors or whatnot, or who were the leads. I just go and bug them, say, hey, what are you doing? What you working on? And most of the time, 90% of the time, they would talk to me. They didn't know who the hell I was, you know, and they would give me like a little lesson or show me what they're doing and ask them what's important. And they'd ask me questions and stuff like this. Very rarely did I ever get somebody say, get the fuck out of here, kid, right? That didn't really happen. It's happened. It's going to happen, right? But most of the time it doesn't happen. I think that was the biggest lessons I've learned. It goes right to what Christina's saying. Don't ask the questions, yes, and then go out and ask the questions. Go see what is happening in the other departments, lighting, sim, whatever it is, you know, character design, props, and just kind of learn how the machine works and what's your little coggy part in it. You know, everybody has the same stories and are going through the same struggle.
That's amazing. All right. Derek, I know you asked a question in the chat, but you're also, I see, on camera. Would you want to unmute yourself to ask your question?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, that seems way more convenient for everyone, I think.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'll just read it. Why not? Rather than try to freeball it. So I'm currently an independent self-taught creative. You know, I've been doing 9 years of music composition and production, 7 years of screenwriting. I'm currently teaching myself design and animation on Krita right now. The drawing pad is on the way. And I'm currently, over the last year, I've been in the process of directing, casting, editing, and producing a little animated tribute short series with a little like a creative team that I got together and commissioned. Um, and I kind of wanted that to double as like a portfolio that I could show people eventually, while also being like a passion project that I've just always wanted to do. Uh, but there are two huge obstacles that I'm facing with that. One, funding this myself is incredibly difficult. And since it's not original properties, since I didn't want to start with that, I heard a saying once that like show that you can walk someone else's walk before you invent your own run, which I thought was like very interesting. And so like, you know, most bands, they start off as cover bands before they play their own original stuff, you know, just like things like that. I thought it would be a cool avenue. But you can't get paid for that. And I can't seek payment for it. And I was wondering, like, what are the avenues that you take to do so with something like that? And the other question is, how do I take this further, since I haven't had any formal education, nor do I have any like certification in the industry?
Yeah, that's kind of tricky. I mean, yeah, I went to school, Cal Arts, got the BFA, you know, all that stuff, and got into the industry. I mean, what I found, I mean, when I look at portfolios, I don't really care if the person is a good artist. It shows right there. You know what I mean? So, but I mean, so if you're looking for work, I'd make your portfolio and apply it. The portfolio stands on its own, right? A traditional education stuff, well, that's great, right? Because you've been exposed to certain things that you're not going to necessarily be exposed to when you're doing it yourself. You know what I mean? So that's the only kind of difference in the playing field, right? That you're talking about. But that doesn't, don't ever think that you're lesser than any other creative out there. There's a gazillions of people who are self-taught. I didn't have my formal training until I went to Cal Arts. That's the first time I did a life drawing in my life, you know, so I was self-taught, and I didn't go to school until later, right? I wasn't in school until I was 21, right? So I'm a late bloomer. But you know, you put your portfolio out there and you apply for everything, right? That's that way to get a job. If you just want to do what you're going to do, now that's harder, but there's tools out there. You've got your Patreon, you've got your Kickstarter. There's new AI tools that are coming out that help market you to an audience that'll get your stuff out there to people. And there's other AI tools that will get that people are looking for artists and don't know where to look because they don't want to go through managers and all that stuff. And so they post, hey, I need artists to do this because I need new colorful shoes, or I need this little design for X, Y, and Z. AI has helped supercharging that kind of gig economy. So there's tons of stuff out there that new stuff every, you know, month or so that would really help, you know, you in that.
And if I could also add on to Derek, I'm not sure if you attended the Legends animated session. I think before this one, it was like I'm gonna mess up the name of it. I think it's start up and manage your own creative business. I totally butchered the name of it, but when that recording goes up, I think that panel recording will have a lot of great resources for you as an independent creator. And we at BRIC have seen this trend of people wanting to go independent, right? Breaking away from the traditional studio system, and we respect that and we honor that. And actually, I think during that panel as well, Nicole and Allison, our co-founders, had announced that BRIC is launching a worker cooperative grant application. So we're starting a $5,000 grant that supports the formation of animation creator co-op companies made of 3 or more individuals, wanting to tell their own individual stories. And I'll make sure to throw that link, that interest link in the chat so you can sign up to learn more about it. But there are definitely resources out there for independent creators such as yourself.
Wow, thank you. That's awesome. Wow. That's super cool to hear about. Yeah, I must have missed that. Wow.
There's a lot going on today.
Yeah. Wow.
Christina or Fortunato, did you have anything else to add there before we move on to the next question?
No, not really. I'm actually answering something here. No, not really. No, I mean, no.
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't
yeah.
either. I just, for what it's worth, I'm also self-taught. I didn't go to art school at all. Obviously, my career path is quite different from what you're saying because, like, I went into video games, and I taught myself on the job. So I don't have advice on, how to get funds and that kind of stuff. But I do want to just encourage you in terms of saying, like, you can have a pretty fulfilling career even if you don't go to school or didn't formally go to school. And to Mark's point, it's like a portfolio speaks for itself. I never look at educational backgrounds when I look at portfolios or resumes.
And when you if you looked at a portfolio and you saw that it was like a bunch of tribute, let's say it was like a storyboard animatic for like a proposed animated short, but it was for like an existing property, do you view that, does that play into how you assess the portfolio, or is it more just like how did this person execute their plan? How did they go from like a script to like storyboard to like animatic to how do you go about that? Is that part of it?
I'm assuming Mark will have a better answer to that than
You
I
go,
would.
Christina, but I want to hear your answer, but I too have an answer. And
Okay.
I'm sure Fortunato has one too. Yeah.
Well, as it relates, so I don't have a one-to-one for you, which I think Mark will, but for me in games, especially when people are starting out and I see people do like essentially their take on a new League of Legends character or their own Valorant agent or a skin, for me, it's like, okay, they've studied our style. They can break it down without like being on the inside and learning, what the foundation of our style is. And then I can kind of like evaluate the taste, I suppose, and their ideas. So even though it's like based on some other IP that's already existing, for me, that's totally fine.
Cool.
Same with VFX, if I can just, I mean, whenever I've hired people, both in VFX or whenever I'm accepting students into a school, what I'm always looking at is, do they have an aptitude for this type? That's all I care about because for me, it's like, I've got to see if you're interested in this and if you're able to do it. And I always think back to when I started. If I were to look back at what I submitted at Warner Brothers when I was hired there, I would be like, oh my God, how the hell did they even hire me with what I had? But they saw something. They saw something in the work that I was doing. And they just knew that there was something about what I was doing that just fit into what it is that they needed. So, and to answer, I think Christine mentioned it or Mark mentioned it, as far as, like when you're talking about formal education, I've never asked anybody for their grades. I've never asked to look at anybody's report card or anything like that. Never, ever. To me, it's the work. It's all about
That's always a work. Yeah. I mean, to the other question, I when I see somebody emulating something else or doing their version of something else, that only tells me one part of that person, right? That tells me of a technical skill. I can see what you're drawing and stuff like this. I mean, we get this all the time, right? I'll get portfolio after portfolio after portfolio that is basically, this person really knows and draws in Miyazaki style. This person draws in other anime style. This person's doing Naruto. This person's doing Dragon Ball. This person, that's fine. But in a bespoke industry such as mine, that's not what we're looking for. And it doesn't speak to a deeper sense of storytelling, character design. I want to see your choices. You know what I mean? I want to see what you're bringing to the table. right? So
Okay.
that's something that I encourage everybody to also push about themselves, right?
Hmm.
Is finding, I don't have a style. You know, I think that was in your first comment. How do I find myself, right? How do you find that style? And you gotta, it's a scary thing. It's just, you gotta try doing the stuff um, that inspires you.
Hmm.
You know, when I was first coming up, I'd be emulating all my favorite comic book artists, right? Michael Golden, John Buscema, Mike Mignola, Frank Miller, right? I
Yeah.
drew like them, right? And what that taught me was it taught me how to draw, right? But
Huh.
but then I had to think for myself. But the only way to do that was do my own characters and come up with my own worlds and explore the own things that excite me, right?
Hmm.
And then a style or a process, actually, more a process than a style, right? A process starts to emerge, right? And how I tackle these drawing problems or issues. And now I'm totally, I couldn't draw a pretty picture, if I had hours and hours and hours, because I've been trained as a storyboard artist and I have to get it done like this. So my whole style is the fastest drawing you've ever seen, and it's all shortcuts, right? It's all
Okay.
shortcuts to get 100 panels done a day, to present to my director, to have none of those accepted, to go back to the drawing table and draw 100 more the next day, right?
Hmm.
So I do not have a beautiful line like all these inkers do in the industry, right? I cannot use a brush pen or do any of that stuff, right? I see people drawing these perfect things with a quill and stuff like this. I'm like, man, I wish I could do that. So
Hmm.
that's what I'm trying to do now, is I'm trying to slow down and get in touch with that side that I totally skipped because of my job. My job made me do it a certain way. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I would say short answer is do other stuff. Do other stuff. You know, you can emulate these other things. Do your own thing. Like what's
Hmm.
inside Derek Swindle's head. That's what I want to see.
Huh. What do you recommend with copyright and with stuff like that? Since I know it's so dicey.
Copyright. Just put it on Instagram. It's done. It's copyrighted. As soon as it's
Wow.
seen, it's done and it's copyright. What are you talking about? Copyright. Jesus, guys. This isn't the 80s anymore where I have to mail it to myself. Let's go.
That's hilarious. Okay.
All right, Derek. Nice talking to you. You
Sorry
stay
about
on.
that.
Let's get some other questions. Yeah, no, it's all good.
Ash, I see you. You've opened up your camera. Do you want to ask your question to the group?
Sure. Real pleasure meeting all of you guys.
Nice to meet you too.
So, yeah, I do have a quick question. I'm a young visual development artist, and as a junior, though, I'm trying to move to LA. Like, I'm currently working as a freelancer, and like, I'm getting into many internships as I, possibly could. And at the same time, though, I'm just trying to make the most out of myself. So I do plan on joining Lightbox Expo this year, hopefully. And any advice on portfolio tips for visual development art?
Christina, you go. This is all you.
Well, I would assume that there's biz dev and animation and visual effects as well. Um, I mean, at the end of the day, like for visual development, at least in games, like we care a lot about understanding your creativity when it comes to like building worlds, and like how you think about worlds. And so when you think about building, like the things we would want to see is like, yes, you want to see a pretty picture, but more importantly, you want to see like all of the detailed thinking behind that, because world building and visual development helps to inform all of the more specific choices we would make. Like, for example, um, if you're showing me a world that you're building, I should have enough, I be able to pull enough ingredients to inform if I were to use that as my basis to create a character out of, like Ashland, for example, like what would a person from Ashland look like? I want to know that like you're able to think through all of the things, like what's the shape language, like common shape language, what's the biosphere like, what kind of buildings do people make and why, just like help me visualize the world so that I can see the blueprint that I would then use to make other things out of. Like at the end of the day, that's what we use visual development artists for. And so the more I can get a sense of how you think and that you're able to think deeply like that, presented through your portfolio, that would be something that I would look for.
I think there's,
Awesome.
I think, I mean, as a visual development artist, that is the hardest, that most competitive and the most subjective place to be, right? Because at the end of the day, it is subjective, right? Whether this, if the director of the project or whatnot sees your stuff and just kind of speaks to them. But I think I want to second what Christina does. I want to see your work, right? I don't care about a finished piece. Yeah, sure, that's nice. One or two's in there, big deal. I want to see that thought process, right? So I'm always looking for what's something that I know that's in the portfolio that you've designed so I could see your process. Example, let's just say Lord of the Rings. What's your take on Lord of the Rings? Or what's your take on The Matrix? Or what's your take on Dante's Inferno? Or what's your take on The Elephant Man? Or what's your take on, you know what I mean? Something that's known and I can see your process. And I don't want to see your perfect Elephant Man. I want to see 8 versions of fucking Elephant Man. You know what I mean? That's what I want to
Yep.
see, right? It's all the differentiates, right? If you go this way, if you do this way, you know, what's your version of Tarzan? You know, what kind of suits is he going to wear when he gets back? You know, so seeing that thinking is very important. So I want to see, as especially for a visual concept design, visual development artist, I want to see your thinking because that's more important to me than your subjective style, right?
Yeah.
That to me and to Christina too, that's what we're looking for because I'm not thinking the shit up. I'm going to be reacting to what you're doing and then reacting to it and then you can react to my reaction. That's what the process is, right? To shake it around. It's draft upon draft upon draft upon draft upon draft and then we discover something and that's the process.
And just one more thing though, like how many artworks or like how many artworks am I supposed to like show in my portfolio?
That's a tricky question because this is how I look at a portfolio. 1 page, 2 page, done.
I
Right?
see.
I don't look at any more. It doesn't matter how much or how little you have put in there because I'll see it in the first 2 pages, whether I want to look more. And if I'm looking more, that means I like it. So there's no silver bullet here on the best. Anybody who tells you there is and say it's got to be 7 this and 2 of that and 5 of that is just BSing and trying to get your money for you know, a conference or something like that. There's no guarantees. There's no silver bullets here. So less is more. That's always my motto is less is more.
Yeah, we do the same in VFX. We usually tell people don't make your demo reels, you know, over a minute or, you know, please don't go over a minute and a half. And there are many, many, many times that, you know, within the first 10 to 20 seconds, I already know. Like you always, of course, you always, you know, you want to go big at the beginning, like just wow them, splash, you know, right at the beginning. Because yes, I mean, I usually know the minute I start looking at a person's demo reel, yeah, this person is, you know, who I want to work with. But there was another part to your question that, you know, that I found interesting. You seem to be very focused on LA, Ash. Is that,
Yes.
yeah. Tell me why.
It's because it's home to most of the animation studios and like you know there are a lot of events going on like Lightbox Expo and there are a lot of famous artists from LA
Yeah.
and that's why I'm mostly aiming for LA because I want to like I'm still young, I'm still a junior artist and I want to make the most of my time. I'm really passionate in what I do and I want to be with people who can help me.
I'm going to say, I mean, I love LA. Most of my career was in Los Angeles, but when I moved, and I'm not just saying this just because, you know, I want to pump Montreal or anything. When I moved to Montreal, I found that I had a much easier time networking and being around a lot of people. It's a city, it's a walking city, very much like Manhattan, allowing me to meet so many different people. There was so much connective tissue in Montreal, and there are a lot of animation studios here as well, and the cost of living, was a lot less. And so I'm just saying, do not limit yourself to something just because, okay, there's a lot of this happening in this city, because there's a lot of other cities where it's happening that may give you a lot more access to people. I found that the one thing about LA that I did not have was access to a lot of people. Going from my work to a function usually took me 2 hours, so I wouldn't even go.
Oh,
In Montreal,
really?
work. Yeah, absolutely. In Montreal, I'll finish work. You can go out for a drink, go out to dinner, and then go to another party all in one night. That will never happen in Los Angeles. So I'm just saying, do not limit yourself to, to a place just because there are a lot of other places that may open doors for you.
Sydney is exploding with
There you
animation
go.
right now. When I was out in Sydney just in the fall for South by Southwest Sydney, I was blown away by how many studios are opening stuff there. It's exploding. Madrid, Spain is exploding. See, you're young, you can get out there, you can put down, you don't even have to put down roots, you can travel anywhere, So I totally agree with Fortunato. I love Montreal. It's a fantastic town. I had a blast there when I was there. But yeah, you can be anywhere now. England, you can be in Sweden, you can be in France, Germany, maybe. Ireland, lots of animation is happening there, and because of games is a big thing too. There's way more game development studios than there are animation studios. You know what I mean? And your skills, you can cross-pollinate now all of a sudden. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't just put your heart on animation. That's one of my things. I think I answered somebody is don't go after your dream job. Don't do it, people. Don't go after your dream job. If you get there, you're going to get there later, but don't go after that. Go after any job, because it's about you learning and developing, right? And being able to put your skills to the test. That's the most important thing. Your development is the thing, not that you're wearing brand labeled jeans or drive a brand labeled car, right?
Or live in LA.
Or have to live in LA. Georgia is blowing up with animation, right? Because of the tax credits and stuff like that. So if you look at where the tax credits and things are, you're going to be like Fortunato. You're going to be a big fish in a little pond all of a sudden.
But
more opportunity.
I love that as great overall advice, Mark. And I know we're right at the end of our session. That happens so fast. I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to give maybe some last parting words of wisdom. If we could go around, if there was one piece of advice you could give to our audience about anything, getting in, sustaining your career, keeping up with the trends.
I'll go first. Then.
Go for it.
This is something that I see a lot of young people not doing enough of, and it's a quote. I got this quote by someone. I'm not going to tell you who I got it from. You'll probably find out. But the quote is this: you've got to network to get work. And I am such a true believer in that. I network a lot. I see a lot of young junior artists not networking at all. I got a lot of the jobs that I got, and even opportunities within a certain job, by networking. So one piece of advice is, if you have an opportunity to network, I don't care if it's the end of your workday and you really don't want to be there, go. Just go. If you can be in person to talk to someone, do that. One last thing, I deal with a lot of junior artists. If you have the opportunity to work on site or remote, choose on site when you're starting out. There is so much learning involved where I can just look over my shoulder and say to someone, how did you do that? But sitting alone in my living room, I'm never going to have that opportunity. Lastly, there was one of the biggest promotions that I got. It was a great opportunity because somebody saw me walking down the hallway and they looked at me and they said, can I talk to you? I remember talking to you at one point and you telling me that you really like blah, 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 blah. And I said, sure, let's go into your office. huge promotion. He saw me walking down the hallway. That was it. If I was in my living room, it never would have happened. So network and try to be around people as much as possible.
Network to get work. I love it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I won't tell you who gave that quote, where I heard it from, but you'll probably find out.
Christina?
Yeah, for me, it would be never stop learning. You think that you're learning a lot, or like it's time to learn when you're starting out in your career, but you honestly don't get to the kinds of positions that we are in today, like without continuing to learn. And even in our positions now, it's really important to continue learning because there's always going to be new trends, new processes, new technology, always something new to learn. And it also just keeps the job interesting for what it's worth. So I would just encourage you to like remember this mindset that you have now in terms of like absorbing a lot of information, and don't let that go.
My bit of advice is what I live by. The proof is in the pudding. I don't care how many years you've had in the industry. I don't care if you're just coming right out of school or if you're an expert. Nobody knows nothing. This is a show me industry, and you have to show it, right? Philosophy and talking about things and what I've experienced and yada, yada, yada. This stuff is alchemy, and nobody knows what it takes to make it good until it's just good, right? And it's a surprises everybody. So my thing is the proof is in the pudding.
I love
Now
it.
I'm
I love
craving
that.
pudding.
Yeah.
Any kind of pudding. The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
So many great sound bites. Keep learning. Proof is in the pudding. Network to get work. Well, I know we're right over time, so I want to thank everyone for joining us. If you tuned in just for this session or for all of our sessions at the BRIC Summit, we thank you so much for being part of our 7th annual BRIC Summit. This has been such a special time for us, such a special opportunity to get to know all of you, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you all
Thanks,
for your
everybody.
time
Thanks,
and
Sarah.
effort.
So
Thanks,
much,
Brett.
everyone.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
luck.
Good night, everybody.
Have a great
Bye.
weekend.
Guys, have a
Thank you.